Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory and I am back with another headphone review for you, and today we are looking at the HiFiMan Deva Pro open back planar magnetic around the ear headphone that sells in two packages. There is a wired version that lists for $199 US, and then there is a wireless version that lists for $329 US, and I will put links where you can buy either of those direct from HiFiMan in the description below. Okay, quick disclaimer. HiFiMan sent me the Deva Pro for evaluation. They have asked nothing in return other than an honest review, and they have made no attempt to influence my opinion in any way, so what you are about to hear me say about this are my thoughts and my thoughts alone. Alright, please remember to like and subscribe and do those things that you do to support YouTube channels, and with that, let's get into the review. Okay, so the HiFiMan Deva Pro. As I said, and you know what, I'll just go ahead and stick them on my head here because that'll get these out of the way and free up my hands to point out a few things. So I mentioned that there are two flavors of packaging that you can buy this thing in. One of them is the $199 US wired version, and that ships with just a classic, now classic, it's still a bit new in the grand scheme of things, but this newer style of HiFiMan cable, right, that has become pretty standard, I think, for their under $1,000 units. Okay, ergonomically, this cable again is an upgrade over those catheter-style tubing cables that they had for a long time and might still have with their higher-end units. But I think this cable still injects a bit of a treble peak sonically, so keep that in mind. However, it does have the 1/4-inch connection here that is just an adapter to a 3.5mm TRS single-ended connector there with a right angle connection right here. And then we have what looks like standard TRS jacks. These are plugs, sorry, TRS plugs here on the headphone end. These are wired differently than standard TRS dual 3.5mm headphone cables. Okay, most 3.5mm cables that have this on the headphone end that I have found wire the tip as positive on either side, and then both the ring and the sleeve on either side together are wired as negative. This one still has the tips as the positive and the sleeves as the negatives, but the rings on either side are open. They are wired to nothing. Okay, so keep that in mind if you want to use an aftermarket cable. That matters. Okay, and the reason that matters is because the other package for this one is the $329 US wireless package. Now, the wireless option comes with this same cable, and it ships with this guy. This is HiFiMan's Himalaya R2R Bluemini Bluetooth dongle. I had it upside down right there. Sorry about that. Okay, so this connects via Bluetooth to any Bluetooth capable device with LDAC. If you want it, it has a small R2R DAC chip in it, and it has a balanced 3.5mm output plug on it. Okay. So this comes with the Deva Pro and that wire I just showed you in the wireless version. So let's look at the cable entry on the headphone real quick. Okay, so I think I have this right. So this will be on your left and your right here. So this is the left cup right here, and we have a 3.5mm input jack, and we have another 3.5mm input jack over on the right cup here. The one on the left is a TRRS, and you can even see that text right there. I don't know if that will show up or not, okay, but 3.5mm TRRS balanced input there to accommodate the TRRS 3.5mm plug on the Bluemini Dongle. All right. That matters. Okay, because as I just mentioned with the different not pin assignments, but the different wiring assignments on the plugs of this cable here, all right, the reason that that is happening is so that there can be cross compatibility with that stock wire or a similarly wired dual 3.5 millimeter cable. But again, be careful with that. And in fact, I have a video explaining that, which I will link to below if you have more questions about what's going on with the wire. Okay, let's just leave it at, if you go with a standard 3.5, dual 3.5 millimeter headphone cable that has TS connections or even most TRS connections on it, you're going to short something out in here, which is not good. So you don't want to do that. Okay, anyway, to get compatibility with the TRRS connection on this and also be able to do dual entry wired input, they had to change some of the wiring. So that's what happened. Be careful with that going with aftermarket cables. Okay, if you plug in your standard aftermarket cable and you see you hear the right channel either disappear or be very quiet / very distorted and poppy and staticky, it's probably because you're not using the right kind of wire. So keep that in mind. And actually, I forgot to put it on this table real quick, so I'm going to pause this and come right back because I need to show you an aftermarket cable that I did find that worked. All right, I'm back, and here is this aftermarket cable that I just mentioned. I got this off of Amazon. This is a Yukamu, I believe that's how you pronounce that, cable right here, and it just has the two ends. On the amp end, actually, it could go either way, but more often than not, on the amp end, we have this 4.4 millimeter Pentacon connector. On the headphone end, we have this 3.5 millimeter TRRS plug right here. And so this kind of cable, and I will put a link to this one in the description below here too, can plug right into the TRRS side of the Deva Pro. And then you can plug this into just about any amplifier you want that either has that 4.4 millimeter Pentacon jack on it, or I can link to these two. You can adapt it to a 4-pin balanced XLR. Okay, plug it into any amp that has a 4-pin balanced XLR out, or you can safely adapt a balanced headphone cable to a single-ended amplifier. Do not go the other way. Okay, you can safely do it this way and plug this into a single-ended amp if you want. Okay, this is the 1/4-inch version of this adapter, but there is also a 3.5 millimeter version, so I can link to both of those in the description as well. Point is, if you want to go aftermarket cables, you need to get something. The safest thing you can do, I should say, is to get something that does something more like this. Okay, so again, I will link to this one down in the description. Heart Audio Cables makes a headphone cable that terminates in the 3.5 millimeter TRRS. So I can link to that as well. And also, I know that Apos Audio, they are an affiliate sponsor of mine, so this will be an affiliate link. This will be the more expensive option, so I'm not necessarily recommending that you do that for a headphone of this price, but if you wanted to, I will link to the appropriate place for their flow cables. Even though the picture on their website, as of the filming of this video, shows a dual 3.5 millimeter TS headphone cable for this headphone, when it ships, it apparently is a single plug TRRS cable that arrives. So they are aware of that. Just for whatever reason, they have the wrong photo on their website. As of this filming, hopefully they fix that. So I'll put that link down there too. That'll be an affiliate link, just to have a fair and open disclaimer. Okay. That's a lot about cabling, but again, it is important. If you don't use the right kind of connections here, you run the risk of popping a driver or burning up your amplifier or something like that, and that's less than ideal, obviously. So that's why I took the time to explain all of that about this. Okay, let's talk about the comfort of this thing and the fit a little bit. We see here this newer style of HiFiMan headband. It's not the suspension strap system. It's this padded single bar, more classic single all-in-one kind of headband here. And there have been comfort issues cited, including by myself, with this style of headphone or this style of headband, because the heavier that these units get with this kind of headband, like the quicker and more aggressive a hot spot can be on the top of the head and lead to some comfort issues. I really did not notice that with this particular unit because HiFiMan claims the mass of this thing is 360 grams, and that's probably about accurate. It is fairly light, mostly comfortable. I do feel it on the top of the head here. There is just a slight bit more pressure there than in some other areas, but it takes a good while for that to have like a real hot spot or start to hurt for me, so I can wear it for a fair amount of time. Now, the clamp force is not all that much, truthfully. And so it can move around a bit as you move your head. Like I hope you saw that anyway. That definitely felt like it was sliding around as I if you're using it at a desk and you look down to, look at a piece of paper or something like that, you can feel it slide forward a little bit. And so I think mostly that's because of the clamp. It doesn't clamp all that hard, and so it slides around some. Be aware of that. If that is of interest to you. Now, another reason that they went with this headband style is, again, you can have the single entry, you can run this with a single cable entry on here with the left side and the TRRS jack. Numerous headphones that have come before that have just that single entry system, you can see wires between the cup and the headband, but notice you do not see any visible external wiring here. That is because they have rigged up a fairly ingenious system, and I hope you can see this, where you can kind of see this little slot right here on the headband, and there's a thin little wire in there that has a gray insulating coating on it to blend in with the metal of the yoke here as much as possible. And that wire trace, I hope you see it. Let's see. Okay. Follows along here and actually travels through the screw assembly here on either side. So it goes around the headband, and then the same thing happens here on the right cup. I have no idea how well that's going to show up. Anyway, I hope you saw it. So that's another reason they went with this headband style, because I think it's probably much easier to do that than with a suspension strap system. With a suspension strap, you'd have to go all the way up around the metal part. Probably doable. They just chose not to go that route. Okay. The pads are fairly thin as far as HiFiMans go. Not a ton of depth there, but they are soft and they are comfy. So the depth inside the cup isn't spectacular, so if you have larger ears or ears that stick out, you might run into an issue of your earlobes touching the inside of the cups. Okay, I didn't have that problem, but I have very average size ears that don't stick out very far. Okay, drivability on this thing. HiFiMan claims that this is a very easy to drive headphone. I partially agree with that. Partially. It is rated at an 18 ohm impedance and has a rated 93.5 decibel per milliwatt sensitivity. So that is low impedance, but it's neither high nor low efficiency. So it does draw a little bit more current than if it were a dynamic driver at 18 ohm and 93.5 decibels. So again, it's kind of in the middle to me. Now, this is marketed very much as like a mobile-friendly headphone. In fact, I saw an ad on Facebook like not long ago where they had some video of the obligatory attractive young woman wearing this, okay, walking around in a park outside or something like that, listening to this with the Bluemini Dongle. And you can use this headphone mobily, like with the Bluemini Dongle, and there are some DAPs and mobile amps that will push this just fine. I'll get to that in just a bit more here. Now, I started talking about drivability, but I want to talk about this, especially since they have that ad showing somebody using this headphone outdoors. I would not recommend taking this outdoors or even being inside with windows open where it could be very windy. The reason is this is a planar magnetic headphone. The membrane inside there, the thing that actually vibrates back and forth to create sound waves that your ears perceive, is very, very thin, as it is in any planar magnetic headphone. And so you get enough of a wind in there, you can pop it and tear that thing. And so I just personally would not recommend using it that way. If you move around a lot inside, you can use this with the Bluemini Dongle or with some DAPs or those flask-style headphone amps, and you'll be fine, except for the fact that it moves around on your head a little bit. So they're trying to bring, HiFiMan is trying to bring an audiophile experience mobile. The 18 ohm, 93.5 decibel per milliwatt thing that I just quoted is part of that. I don't know if ergonomically it's fully fleshed out and happening yet there to the level that they want it to, but it's headed in the right direction. Okay, so about that drivability. I tried powering this with my Canon N6 Mark II DAP that has an EO2 module in it. I had to put it on high gain and I turned the volume level up to about 80 to 85, and the maximum on that unit is 100. It has a 0 to 100 volume scale. So high gain, EO2 module, which is already somewhat on the more powerful side for that N6 Mark II modular system, and 80 to 85 out of 100 volume. But that really, that woke this up, sounded really good. I just got the FIO M11 Plus, I believe. I believe it's the Plus version from APOS. They sent that to me to review. And a similar story there. Had to put it in high gain, use the balanced output, and turn the volume level up to, now that one's interesting that it goes up, its scale goes from 0 to 120. In volume. It's like it's a speedometer instead of a volume counter or something like that. But anyway, it goes from 0 to 120, and I had to put it again high gain, balanced output, and volume level was like right around 100 before this got to, to the 72, 73 to 75 dB average volume level that I like to listen to for critical listening. Okay, so yeah, you can drive it with DAPs. You kind of kill headroom on even some of those more powerful DAP units, getting these there. I tried using the stock cable with this, and driving these directly off of the headphone output of my Surface Pro laptop and from the headphone output of my old Kindle Fire tablet. In both cases, the sound was actually really good. There was sound. One thing that HiFiMan succeeded with the drivability here was that even from those small little 3.5 millimeter outputs on tablets and laptops and that sort of thing, the sound is very balanced. There are not the dropouts in certain frequency ranges, particularly in the bass, that you frequently hear when a planar headphone is underpowered. Okay, like it still had nice, full, rich, punchy sound, but it was not very loud. It was very quiet. Did not come anywhere near the, up to the 75 dB average level that I like to listen to. We're talking lucky to get 60 dB AV, especially from the Kindle Fire. The Surface Pro 4 got a little bit louder, not much. Okay, so that's a drivability issue. Now again, it's interesting that they solved the balancing out the frequency response, I think, from those not very powerful devices, but they just didn't get the overall volume level to come up with it. So that's like the next step I think they need to take to make these truly easy to drive. The Bluemini Dongle has plenty of power. This will get its own review in the near future, okay? It drives these things plenty loud. I will talk a little bit about the sound of these specifically with this when I get to the sound section, but plenty of power here, okay, by design, I'm gonna guess. Okay. That is a lot of ergonomic and design and build stuff, and that really is where a lot of the quirks and the need-to-knows of this unit are, is in the design, the fit, the wiring, and the drivability and that sort of thing. And again, be very careful about taking this outside if you want to go mobile, about taking it outside, particularly when it's windy. I just wouldn't do it. Okay, that's me though. Up to you whether you want to risk that. Okay, the sound, finally, right? Here's the thing. These sound great. I have been very pleasantly surprised and very much pleased with the sonic performance of these. And so you can click away now if you want. You heard all the quirks. You hear me say they sound good. Some of you will just go at that point. That's fine. But many of you will want to know why I say this. And I think you'll also want to stick around because I'm going to make some interesting comparisons with other headphones here in a bit. Okay. The sound signature on these things, the tuning is mostly neutral. If you are familiar with the sound of the HE400 SE or the Edition XS, as two other HiFiMans out there that have like a neutral, warm-ish kind of a sound, maybe just a very gentle V to it. This is slightly more neutral than those. Still has great bass extension, still has great treble extension. It doesn't have quite as much warmth as the Edition XS or the HE400 SE has. So it just, to me, it comes across as just a little bit more neutral. But it also sounds like reasonably large with the forward sloped ear pads. Even though they're not very thick, there's still a fairly big sound stage here, which is fairly characteristic of HiFiMans. It's not huge. It's not huge like the egg-shaped cups models of theirs, but it's getting on the bigger side. I think there's good timbre all throughout the frequency range. It's not like super standout as an amazing timbre, but it's really solid and doesn't have a glaring weakness, in my opinion. I already mentioned the good extension. The bass is what is there. Again, it's not elevated in presence because we still have a mostly neutral sound signature here, but it's punchy. It's got some good pop to it in there. Then to me, there are two key standouts of the sound of this thing for a $200 headphone. And that is the overall spatial presentation is quite holographic. With, again, it's on the bigger side, not huge, but just on the big-ish side, and it has very coherent imaging and separation. Like it's pretty holographic. One of the more, if not one of the most holographic $200 headphones out there. And then to me, the resolution at the price point is also excellent. This thing was resolving lots of subtle little details, like chairs creaking in a live symphonic performance, or the rosinousness, the zizzy sound of bows being dragged across strings, ghost notes in drums, room reverbs, like all of that kind of stuff. Like this does a really good job of resolving all of those, and is one of the best at the price point that I have heard doing that. To me, we just get an overall refined, very balanced audiophile kind of tuning and presentation here with no real glaring weaknesses. HiFiMans have struggled with sibilance in the past. I very rarely heard that. It's not never, but it's pretty rare that I hear it on here. I mentioned like a very balanced sound. The tuning is very balanced, so it's neutral. So we have excellent tonal balance throughout the meaning tonality and tonal balance throughout the audible spectrum, and it just sounds just like everything just seems well balanced out. There's not anything that's so much better than everything else that it completely distracts you. I think the spatial presentation and the resolution are strengths, but they are not so far ahead of the other things that they just way stand out and distract in how good they are compared to everything else. And then likewise, there are no real weaknesses that I can detect that pull your attention away in the negative direction either. It's just a very balanced, well-rounded, refined, neutral audiophile type of sound. They really nailed it on that, I think, here for in a $200 unit. So with that, let's talk about how it compares with some of the competition and some other similarly priced models. The first comparison that I thought to do with it, I should say, sorry, a lot of the critical listening that I did with this thing, I did a lot of testing with the Bluemini Dongle. Then I used my KN-N6 Mark II DAP with the EO2 module a fair amount. And then for desktop situations, I used my Modius and Shit Asgard 3, Shit Modius, Shit Asgard 3 stack. And then to test scaling up, eventually I did try my Berkeley Alpha S2 DAC and my Vioelectric HPA V281 amp with this aftermarket Yokomo cable here with those adapters I showed you earlier so that I could plug them into different types of amplifiers without worrying about things and without using that stock cable. Okay, the sound with the Bluemini Dongle, not as resolving. Okay, I think that has a lot to do with Bluetooth and LDAC. Even as good as LDAC is, it still is Bluetooth. And also, I'm not convinced that this is the most resolving unit, even though it has a remarkable amount of power for the size. I'm not convinced it's the most resolving thing yet. I will do a full review of this in due time. And I think it also pushes the mids forward just a little bit on this. So these can get a little bit more shouty, honky, hollow sounding when they're powered by this than when they are powered by an Asgard 3 or my N6 Mark II or the Vio V281, any of those things. So quick comments on using the dongle with that. Even though it's really easy to use, I think there might be the Bluemini Dongle might need a little bit of work. That will get a full review of its own. Back to comparisons. Okay. The first thing I compared it with was HiFiMan's own HE400 SE, which was originally a $150 unit and now sells for $109. Only wired, also planar magnetic. You can see there's a lot of similarity going on here. This has the slightly warmer tuning to it. It's a little bit heavier. Does not work with the Bluemini Dongle. It can be used with basically any dual 3.5mm headphone cable that fits the jack recesses, which is most. But this one adds some sibilance in the treble. It can be a little hot up top at times, and it's not as resolving, like noticeably so, like not as resolving. So $200 for the wired version, $109. This is a clear step up. So that was the first comparison I did. Massdrop Sennheiser HD58X Jubilee, which I have a review of recently out there too. Another one of these headphones that, like, for most of the time, it's at $190. I think it might be on sale right now. I should have checked, but I forgot to. Sometimes it goes on sale for like, more like $145, $150, somewhere closer in that range. But spends most of its time at $190. It's a dynamic driver. You can definitely hear the difference between dynamic and planar here, where these sound like more of a point source kind of sound. These sound like more of a wall of sound kind of presentation. They just that bigger planar sound to them. Because of the larger driver area, it sounds like the sound is emanating from a larger area of vibration, because that's what's happening. But these don't stack up. They don't. These are much more resolving, much more holographic spatial presentation. They have better frequency extension in both directions and just generally outperform this. Nothing against the 58X. I think it's an excellent headphone at the price point. I just think that now this headphone has been caught in terms of an about $200 headphone and being an excellent entry point into the hobby. Okay? Reality, it happens in time. So I'm going to pull out two other comparisons that I did, and that's these guys, these German legends. Massdrop Sennheiser HD6XX, Beyerdynamic DT880, this is the 600 ohm version. I have detachable dual entry cable modded my DT880, which is why you don't see a wire dangling off of it. I called these German legends. for two reasons. One, they are German. Two, they really are legends. Okay? These two have a reputation of being about $200 headphones. These are, I think, right at $200 more often than not these days. These are like $220 normal price from Massdrop's website, which I can link to as well. And I have reviews of both of these up, which I will link to below. These sound amazing for the price. The mid-range on these are what they are really known for. They have that neutral warm signature with just those organic, silky smooth mids with amazing mid-range timbre. They also scale up really well with increasing quality source gear, and they have more and more to give you as you climb the ladder in source gear quality. The DT880 neutral bright signature, price leading spatial presentation and detail retrieval throughout the frequency spectrum. These might be a little bit better in mid-range detail retrieval, but from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, I think these take it on balance. Okay, neutral bright, excellent spatial presentation, and they also similarly scale up the way these do, and these do in the treble what these do in the mid-range. Like, that's the level of quality we're talking about when you put them on the right amp. These are very amp picky because they will get very sharp and sibilant up top on mostly cheaper and then just otherwise amps that don't control treble very well. These can get muddy and shouty in the mid-range if you're on an amp that doesn't control them very well, or you have a DAC that doesn't give you a very clean signal through the mid-range. I bring these out, and the very fact that I bring these out to talk about the Deva Pro ought to tell you what I think of this. Because, apologies, cough. Because these are legends. They scale up like crazy. They are in many of our collections. They have stood the test of time as being really excellent headphones at their price points. I think the Deva Pro at $200 belongs in the conversation with those two. I really do. It has a slightly different signature than either of them. It is a little bit easier to drive than either the 300 ohm Sen or the 600 ohm Bayer. It's planar, so it's a little bit different there. Like, it has a little bit more bass presence than the DT880, but not quite as much bass control. It's close, not quite there, but it has a similar spatial presentation to these, sounding a little bit planar bigger again, but the holographicness very close between these two. The 6XX still has the better, more organic mid-range timbre. The DT880 still has the better treble timbre, but I think this is the most balanced of the three. Like, it's got a little bit more bass presence. It has the holographic presentation to it. It has more treble extension and presence than this one, but not quite as much as this one. I think this one is more resolving than the 6XX in the bass and in the treble. I think this one is similarly resolving to the DT880, although the DT880 is just ahead of it, but still, this also is right there. It even scales up. Like, when I went from, I first listened to all three of these and compared them side by side by side, ABC kind of comparison from my Asgard 3 and Madia stack. Then I went up to the Berkeley Alpha S2 plus my Vioelectric HP V281 stack, and like, the same results happened. These scaled up similarly to the way the DT880 did and the 6XX did. So it may sound like this didn't have like a huge strength that's beyond those two, and I would say that's true, but it also doesn't have the weaknesses that these do. Like, I've basically never heard this go shouty and honky. Maybe a little bit with the Bluemini Dongle, but on any of the other amps, okay, didn't hear that either. And then again, this one rolls off in the treble too much for some people, and then the spatial presentation is kind of that three blob, center, left, right, not a lot in between. This one is much more fleshed out there. These can just get very sharp and piercing in the treble if they're not on the right source gear or the recording is bad, and they can be a little bit too lean in the bass for some. These, I doubt, will have that problem for all but the most ardent bass heads. So Yeah, I think they belong up there. I think HiFiMan... Sorry about the abrupt pause there. My camera shut down. Anyway, I'm back, and I think the last point that I was making is that I think HiFiMan really has a well-engineered product here sonically. And I have talked at length about it and shared a lot about the quirks earlier, because I think a lot of people are going to be interested in this, and they should be aware of the quirks. The wiring quirk, the fit being a little bit sketchy at times, the Bluemini dongle being okay, not being super detailed, pushing the mids forward a little bit, but being mostly functional and still pretty decent if you want to use this mobily in a wireless setting, but again, careful about doing that outside. But sonically, for $200 if you get the wired version, like, 'cause you have essentially a $200 headphone here, sonically right there with the best of them out there at $200. In my honest opinion, that I am in no way paid to say, that's just my honest assessment of this right now. Like, it's really good, one of the best sounding $200 options out there. I think it's better suited for stationary use than true on-the-go use, because it's open back, because it's fit and sliding around on the head a little bit. You also need to be aware of the whole wiring issue, and again, I'll link to this cable and all of that, and so that's why I spent some time there, and I've made a whole video about the wiring, which I will link to in there below. But I think HiFiMan has an overall very good product here, with still room to improve. So if there's a silent revision or another version of the Deva Pro on the horizon that clamps just a little bit harder, so that it stays in place on the head just a little bit better, and especially if the Bluemini dongle continues to have new generations and improve, I think this could really be arguably the best overall $200 package out there right now, because sonically, and I'm not kidding on this, I really think this is true, it's competitive with these two. Okay, and what they can do. And I think that really says a lot about a $200 headphone, even here in the year 2022. So I apologize for the length of this. I hope all of that was good information. Good job tuning this and creating a great sounding headphone here for $200 HiFiMan. Just a couple of things to work out in the ergonomic sense. Okay, and I will leave it there. So I am Wave Theory. Thanks for watching. This has been my review of the HiFiMan Deva Pro. And as always, enjoy the music.